Because sometimes Christians have had different approaches. They've had different ways of understanding how they're going to relate to culture. One of the very popular ways that we're seeing, maybe in our neighbors to the south, is what's called the nationalistic approach. And this is where Christians try to legislate and dominate a nation's culture. Let's get that slide up there. The nationalistic approach. And it's like, how should we approach the culture? Well, some people have the idea that you need to pass a law and just make people act like Christians. That you're going to force people to act like Jesus by passing laws. You use the means of the state. And you live into what I call the myth of a Christian nation. There's also a relativistic approach. And this is where we just say there is no difference. That we erase any distinction between the dominant culture and following Jesus. And it's the attempt to make Christianity exactly like the culture they reside in. And then finally, there's the escapist approach. And this is the attempt to just leave culture. It's like you go off to a colony or you start a monastery and you wall yourself off from the world. And you're like, we're just going to ignore the problem. We're just going to run away. We don't want anything to do with the culture. And surprisingly, in this letter of 1 Peter, we don't find any of these options. Instead, we have the exile approach, the place of tension, the place of paradox, being in the world, but not of the world. And this means we never try to dominate the culture, become the culture, or escape the culture. We live as citizens of another kingdom in whatever nation we live in. Peter's audience knew this because exile is deeply biblical language. It's the story of Israel being carried away to Babylon and learning to be the faithful people of God in a foreign land. It's a real tension. There's all sorts of complexities there. And it's a tension that I think is true, that Peter tells us it's true of every follower of Jesus. The Apostle Paul says the same when he's writing to the Philippians, who are also in that eastern area. He writes, our citizenship is in heaven. Our citizenship is in heaven. We've had an identity shift. And so we live as exiles, strangers, citizens of heaven.